On this Friday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, we are talking the positives and negatives of Desmond Bane's impending return. Beware the Ides of March, Memphis. Is there anything that may betray or shock you as the season comes to the close for the Grizzlies on this Ides of March? And then we'll also preview Grizzlies Thunder this weekend. Damichael Cole is back. It's a Friday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Friday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax, and again, it is always good to be able to say one of your hosts because that means Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis Grizzlies beat writer, award-winning Memphis Grizzlies beat writer is with us here on Locked On Grizzlies. Good to have you back, partner.
It's always good to be back, Joe. You know, we got a lot of things to talk about today.
Ooh.
I mean, this Desmond Bane conversation is starting to gain a little heat and everything else around this team. So, let's get it popping.
Your boy, Mark Giannotto, is one of the ones adding fuel to the fire. And for the record, I like Mark. I just like to say your boy because obviously Desmond and Mark work together at the Commercial Appeal.
Desmond and Mark do work together at the Commercial Appeal.
Damichael and I'm not used to having you here. I got to get back in the groove here, partner. Damichael and Mark work at the Commercial Appeal together. Desmond and Mark most certainly do not work together for the Memphis Grizzlies. Let's start to lock in here. Before we get too far into that, I want to remind you that we are proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, literally anywhere you get podcasts. Be an everydayer. Check us out each and every time that an episode drops. We would appreciate it. I know Damichael appreciates it. We are huge fans of you joining us and communicating with us, interacting with us in the comments, hitting us up on X, social media, whatever the case might be. Continue to help us grow Locked On Grizzlies. Damichael, thankfully you missed the last two shows because you didn't have to talk about the Wizards game or the Hornets game. We missed you terribly. They were not great basketball games. We're just going to move on. Right? Because there's positive energy surrounding the Memphis Grizzlies in terms of injuries.
Yeah, there was some injury updates
in a long time, right? Desmond Bane seemingly on track to make his return as soon as tomorrow against the Oklahoma City Thunder. We'll preview that game later on in the show. But, you know, Bane was doubtful for the game on Wednesday against the Hornets. And as we've talked about here numerous times, usually the next step is a questionable designation and actually playing for the Grizzlies. And Jaren Jackson Jr. was doubtful and Vince Williams Jr. was doubtful. So theoretically, it could be, again, like Avengers Endgame. And all these, the cavalry arrives to help these injured Grizzlies. And, maybe we can stop watching some of these guys play basketball as much as we've had to watch over the last few games. But I'm curious, we mentioned Mark Giannotto of the Commercial Appeal, your coworker, compatriot, whatever the case might be. And I like Mark, but I don't want to say a firestorm because I don't think it was that controversial of a take, but he did generate some conversation. And as somebody that does that on X myself from time to time, I can appreciate when someone else does it. He asked a fair question. Why do we want to see Desmond Bane back at all? Why do we want to risk him getting injured? We know how important Morant is. He interacted with our mutual friend Parker Fleming talking about this topic. Mark asked a fair question. Is it the smart thing to do to bring back Desmond Bane this season? So let's weigh the pros and cons of this, Damichael. Some positives and negatives of Desmond Bane returning. The obvious positive, for me at least, is that your second best or third best player is back in the fold. He logs minutes with G.G. Jackson, logs minutes with Vince Williams Jr. That all matters in terms of getting a larger sample size of how he looks alongside those guys who hopefully are long-term rotation pieces. The obvious con, Mark has already mentioned, the idea of what happens if he gets hurt. Serious injury in these games that essentially mean nothing for Memphis in terms of record, in terms of wins and losses and actually lottery position. The Memphis Grizzlies aren't making the play-in. right? So why is Bane returning? How do you feel about this? Where do you stand in terms of, again, I see both sides of the argument, but I want to see Bane alongside this version of Vince Williams Jr., this version of Gigi Jackson. For me, it is worth the risk. What say you?
Yeah, and I don't even think there's quote unquote risk, in my opinion. It's basketball. Like everyone that's on the floor, Jaren Jackson Jr., when he plays, he's at risk of being hurt. Vince Williams, Gigi Jackson, when they play, anytime you step on the floor, there is the potential for an injury. And, I'm just not a fan of that theory. Desmond Bane is a hooper. Desmond Bane, as I've said for all of the weeks leading up to this, that guy's not going to want to sit out. I've been around him over 2 years now. Desmond Bane is not going to want to sit out. He's not that type of guy. He's not that, oh, fine, yeah, it's just 15 games. It's no. Desmond Bane's going to want to play. And that's exactly the case right now. He wants to play. I'm not going to tell a healthy guy who's been playing 3-on-3 for 2 weeks now that he can sit out the rest of the season and he wants to play. Not happening. So from the pro side, you kind of hit it on it a little bit there by pointing out the fact that he gets to play alongside of some of these young guys, get that experience. Gigi Jackson wasn't playing much when Desmond Bane was healthy. If you remember, January 12th is when Desmond Bane got hurt. January 13th, it was the second night of that back-to-back, is when Gigi Jackson scored 20 points. And then he scored 23 points, a couple days later. And Gigi Jackson was on the board after that. But before that, when Desmond Bane, John Morant, all those guys were playing, Gigi Jackson was on the bench in his warm-up, slapping hands, doing handshakes and stuff like that. So now we get to see what some of that looks like, And I talked to Gigi about it. I said, are you excited to play with Desmond Bane? And he was telling me, he was like, man, this is, Gigi gives some very authentic answers sometimes. It's kind of hilarious because sometimes you think the Grizzlies will grab him by the neck and say, hey, calm down, grab him by the collar, excuse me, and be like, calm down, Gigi Jackson. But he basically said something like, yeah, because I get to relax a little bit. And, in terms of,
I like that honesty.
Hey, I love that answer. So he said he gets to relax a little bit. Desmond Bane will draw the top defenders, and guys will, relax on him a little bit more, which is, like you said, it's an honest answer. So I think that kind of headlines the pros for me. The only real con that I see in this situation is the fact that Desmond Bane, and this is a con depending on what you consider a con, Desmond Bane playing increases your winning chances. And right now, the Grizzlies, when they lose, it's kind of not really the worst thing in the world because they're holding off the Toronto Raptors for that number 6 spot in the projected lottery standings. And if you hold the Raptors off, you increase your chances of securing the top 4 pick and potentially even the number 1 pick. So Desmond Bane plays, then obviously your chances to win go up. That's probably the only con for me, and that's not even just a true hard con. The whole injury stuff, Joe, I'm not a fan of it. Like I really don't like that's a this era thing. That's like when did we get like this? Like guys have played 80 games in the season, 82 games in the season for years, and I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but I think
please.
I think back to like when Derrick Rose, got hurt, right? And a lot of people in that playoff series with the Bulls, and people say, oh, he wasn't supposed to be in the game. Then, I get it. In theory, it makes sense to take him out of the game. But if he doesn't get hurt, no one is questioning, why did he keep Derrick Rose in the game so late, even though they were up so many points? No one's questioning it if he doesn't get hurt. Brandon Clark, I guarantee you most people don't even remember the quarter that he got hurt in because it's irrelevant. He got hurt in the first quarter, the end of the first quarter, and no one remembers that. It's a moot point to me. I really don't understand the risk, in it, because if you're saying that you care about Desmond Bane's risk, then why not sit out Jaren Jackson Jr.? Why not send out Gigi Jackson? Why not send out Vince Williams? That's my point.
I agree, especially with Jaren there, right? Because again, Vince Williams Jr., Gigi Jackson, the investment is not as sizable, right? Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, John Morant, obviously, those guys are all about to make, 8 figures a year starting next year. You're trying to protect your investment. So I understand that side of it. But I'm with you. I think the risk of injury is outweighed by the reality of the Grizzlies culture, right? You either have a culture or you don't. You either have a standard or you don't. And I think Bane's return, impending return, whether it's Saturday or Monday, whatever the case might be, it is going to be a reflection of that culture and standard that they're trying to build, that they have built. Desmond Bane, I know you know this, partner, is kind of an unsung hero of that, right? Ja in the early years got a lot of credit for that. Dylan Brooks, from me and from others, got some credit for that. Desmond Bane is kind of the quiet in the shadow culture tone setter. And I think he's a big piece of that for this young team. And he's setting an example. Here's a guy who's going to be on a max contract starting next year in a season that is essentially rudderless now, going and out there being a professional and finishing the job. I think that's going to speak a lot of volumes, especially to the young guys on this team.
I think, because here's the thing. You just made a great point that didn't even click in my mind, while I was speaking on Desmond Bane. Everyone you talk to in the locker room will tell you, like Santi says, he's the hardest worker.
Sure.
Gigi Jackson says first one in, last one out type guy. Luke Kennard says it. I think Gigi Jackson said he's the leader of the team. What type of message does that send for the guy who most people call the hardest worker, the guy who's in the gym the most, to say, I'm healthy. I'll destroy y'all in practice, but when these last 15 games, I'll sit them out. We talk about the culture in terms of setting a winning environment going into next season. That's not a great example to me. And some people say that doesn't make any sense in terms of like the carryover into next season. But to me, it's very relevant, especially when you attach it to these young guys.
Especially when you have guys like Desmond Bane that theoretically will be in Memphis the next half decade, right? That matters a lot. So I'm cool with him playing. It sounds like Damichael is as well. Let us know what you think in the comments. Do you disagree with us? Do you think Bane should be shut down, sat out, protected? I agree with Damichael. Even if he gets hurt a week from now, knock on wood, and you guys were wrong. It doesn't make us wrong. The reality is you either talk about it or you're going to be about it. And I think Desmond Bane is about it. And I mean that in the most complimentary way possible. That's a guy that you can build a franchise around, maybe not just in terms of talent, but in terms of mentality. That matters a lot too in sport, regardless of the level, professional all the way down to peewee. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we are going to take a look at the Ides of March. I'm a big history buff. Poor Julius Caesar had a rough day, a couple thousand years ago. But it's going to be a good day for Damichael and I as we caution you to look out for a couple of possible spoiler, surprise difficulties that the Grizzlies may face as the season concludes. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by eBay Motors. It is that time of the week. Once again, Damichael Cole, our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Floyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you some players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Damichael Cole, it's one of the biggest picks yet. It is Grady Dick. The Raptors seem committed to giving us 30 minutes of Dick each night as they rotate in and out of the players in their lineups. It's going to be a big, big run for Dick over the next several weeks. So we'll have to see how Dick fits in Toronto and in other places, of course. So Grady Dick really going to be a fascinating watch to see how Dick interacts with the other players on the court and his opponents over the next several weeks. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. It's the same thing with your vehicle. It's the same thing with Grady Dick, to be honest. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your car alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to United States customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. I'm going to be honest with you, partner. I have a lot more respect for Jimmy Fallon after doing that ad read. Like, I would always make fun of Jimmy Fallon for cracking up on SNL when he was doing his bits and his jokes. It's not as easy as it looks.
Shout out to you. I don't know if I would have been able to do it, Joe.
Gracious. I chuckled a little bit. I mean, I got to be honest, but, it gets hard when Dick's involved. the Ides of March, right? The idea of history here. I'm a big history buff, like I mentioned earlier in the show. Julius Caesar, March 15th, back in 44 AD, assassinated by the Roman Senate, all those sorts of things. We're almost 2,000 years removed from that. But the Ides of March are the idea of, a surprise, a betrayal, whatever the case might be. And I thought it might be fun here at this part of the show to talk about some things that may betray us going into next season, looking at the current state of affairs with the Grizzlies. And since I'm the big nerd that suggested this to Michael, I'll go first. I think my biggest betrayal that I am nervous about going into next season, and I don't want it to sound like I am hating on him because I am genuinely impressed with the way that he's played this year. I worry about, depending on how the offseason goes, how Vince Williams Jr. translates as a true secondary facilitator off the bench. Because if you subscribe to the idea of John Morant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr., and then your reserves are Vince Williams Jr., Luke Kennard, Gigi Jackson, Santi Aldama, and a big that they sign or a big that they draft, Donovan Clingan, fingers crossed. Whatever the case might be, if that's the way you perceive this team, and I think it makes sense, I would be cool with it, that means that you're relying a lot on Vince Williams Jr. to be that guy. They're giving him tons of reps. He's shown capacity. We've talked about it here on Locked On Grizzlies several times. He's better at it than any of us thought he would be. Will that carry over to when this team is actually trying to be one of the top teams in the Western Conference? I'm not saying it's unlikely. I'm just reminding everyone that what Vince Williams Jr. has done in that role in particular is beyond what we even saw from him in college, much less at the NBA level.
Yeah, I think that's a solid point. And I'm kind of going to play off of that a little bit because what you said there was kind of important in terms of the point that I took from it is the fact that some of these guys who are in higher usage situations right now, they're going to go back to smaller roles. And there is the question of how those guys will adjust when they're playing alongside of those players. It's easier for a lot of basketball players to get in a rhythm when you're able to dribble 2 or 3, 4 times during a possession, swing the ball, get the ball back. Vince Williams might go 2 possessions without touching the ball. With John Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. on the floor, he might go 3 possessions with just 1 touch, on offense. So it's going to be a different game. But kind of to the same point, I want to pivot a little bit. And one thing I want to say beware of is empty stats. Use your eyes, Grizzlies front office. The eyes will tell you everything you need to know from this point on. For example, you look at these recent games like Scottie Pippen Jr. Let's take his stat line: 9 points, 10 assists in this last game. I thought he was fine. It was okay, but watching the game, I didn't think he was Steve Nash, or anything out there.
Pop out. Yeah, he didn't do anything too flashy.
Exactly, but the stat sheet said 10 assists. The stat sheet said, man, this is a guy.
And to your point, Trey Jemison is in a similar boat, right? He dominates the Washington Wizards recently. But Kyle Kuzma was playing center. So context matters along this point as well.
Use the eyes. The eyes will tell you more than you know. And when I say empty stats, let me kind of clarify what I mean by this, because like Gigi Jackson's numbers haven't felt empty to me. He's shooting a lot of spot up shots, 1 dribble pull ups, things like that. Think rookie year Tyreke Evans. Think rookie year Michael Carter Williams, guys who were heavily involved in rookie of the year races. Think early in his career, Brandon Knight, when he was on those Phoenix Suns teams, averaging 17, 18 points a game, whatnot. That's what I mean. Guys who basically are put in situations where they're able to have a high usage rating. And then when they get put around other players and the usage goes down, the whole idea of them being that same caliber player changes. That's why I'm big on the return of a Desmond Bane, because it's going to take the ball out of a Vince Williams' hands a little bit more. It's going to take the ball out of a Luke Kennard's hands a little bit more. It's going to take the ball out of John Conchard's hands. It's going to take the ball out of Scottie Pippen Jr. hands a little bit more. How will those guys play when operating in that secondary role? We know, about Luke Kennard. I said his name just because it's going to actually take the ball out of his hands more, but we know what it is there. We know what it is pretty much with John Conchard. But it's more for the younger guys. you only got a couple roster spots to play with this offseason. Lamar Stevens is in that conversation too. Remember how we were talking about the difference between Lamar Stevens playing small ball center and small forward? Look, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I just want to say there's been a difference so far. When he was playing small ball center, a little bit more productive than the wing of Lamar Stevens that we've seen up to this point. Not saying it could change. I like the guy's game. It could. But my point is, beware of the empty stats, because right now, guys are going to get a lot of opportunities. Somebody's probably going to average 15, 16 points a game because somebody has to. And make sure you take into account all of the factors there before making a decision this offseason that could really impact where the Grizzlies go forward.
Beware using these last few weeks and trying to make it an argument for anybody's place in front of an already established rotation player. I think that is a major piece of this. You trust your eyes, like Damichael said. Don't necessarily trust the numbers. Continue to watch the games and continue to count on Locked On Grizzlies, right? Damichael and I will have your back. We won't steer you wrong, I promise. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will preview Grizzlies Thunder. We'll talk about that game on Saturday night. I'm going to put Damichael on the spot, see if he thinks Desmond Bane will make his return Saturday night or not. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, remember, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, I know you love baseball. You're Atlanta Braves there, Damichael Cole. Mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th, 7 p.m., again, local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Go Nationals, unfortunately. They're probably not going to be very good this year. But the Braves, they should be pretty good. And check out that MLB preview. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Stitch Fix. You know that instant confidence boost you get from an outfit that makes you look really good. You know Damichael Cole knows. I don't know as well because I'm not nearly as handsome or as suave as Damichael. But you can have this with Stitch Fix, I promise. You can upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. Stitch Fix makes it all so easy. You give a stylist your size, your style, your budget preferences. You order boxes how you want, when you want, with no subscription required. I hate shopping. They save me time and effort with Stitch Fix. Plus, I get outfits that make me look good, or at least try to make me look good, and make me truly feel really good. If you don't love something, you can just send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. stitchfix.com/lockedon. Go check them out today. When we come back on Locked On Grizzlies, previewing Memphis's trip to Oklahoma City to take on the Thunder, taking on OKC. Going to be a blast. We'll check it out next. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, joined by Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis Grizzlies beat writer, award-winning Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. We've been talking Desmond Bane's impending return. I'm going to put Damichael on the spot here momentarily. We've been talking the Ides of March and bewaring in Memphis empty stats and not watching the games, being a box score watcher. I'm going to correct myself because the game Saturday night is in Memphis, right?
Yep,
the game is in Memphis, FedEx Forum. The Grizzlies taking on the Thunder. And the Thunder, one of the best teams in the NBA this year. We've already talked about a lot of that. If you feel like these two teams just played each other, they did literally last week. So in terms of Chet Holmgren, SGA, all these different pieces and players, that all kind of remains the same. The biggest piece of this preview for me, Damichael, since it is a home game, is this the night that Desmond Bane returns? I think Jaren Jackson Jr., Vince Williams Jr. are also in that mix, but Desmond Bane obviously is the one who's been out the longest. Do you think, because again, as of this recording, haven't had a chance to go to practice yet, all that sort of stuff. As of this recording, do you believe that Desmond Bane will make his return on Saturday night?
I think so. Everything that I've heard is that the guy's ready to go. Whether it's talking to players, whether it's talking to the people around him, he's looked good, or he's actually looked good for a little bit now. He's looked good probably for about a week. He's definitely putting it in another gear. He's been doing 5-on-5 for I think probably about a week or so now. And he's pretty much ready to go. At this point, it's the Grizzlies, they like to operate out of the caution and whatnot. And I think the fact that you have 2 days in between the game, you have the Thursday, you have the Friday before that game on Saturday, I think that factors in to the decision here. And after this, you got a road trip. And, I mean, most players want to come back at home, right? So I think it makes sense. Let them get back on the floor at home. Let the home crowd show him some love and whatnot, and then he can go out on the road trip and hoop. I think he's back.
I think he's back too, and obviously you would have more intelligence on that than I would. You're exactly right about that road trip that's coming up. A 4-game kind of West Coast swing. They go to Sacramento, Golden State, then they play the Spurs, and then they fly back out to the West-ish coast to take on the Nuggets. So a weird week ahead for the Grizzlies in terms of schedule. I do think it's going to be really interesting to watch how they treat those games and how they treat Bane moving forward. I'm curious, Damichael, and again, if this isn't fair to you, by all means, let me know. Again, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Memphis was competing for seeding, if the Grizzlies were the 2 seed or the 3 seed, and they're trying to get home court advantage claimed, do you think Bane, because you said he's been ready for about a week now, at least by your estimation, your personal opinion, it sounds like. Do you think Bane would have come back sooner, or do you think the not hesitance, but the patience that's been shown is a reflection of the current state of the season? Do you think he would have already been back if the Grizzlies were in a place where they were competing for the playoffs?
I think they probably would have pushed it a little bit more, especially him, but if he would have been back earlier, it'd probably been a couple games before, a week before, so three games maybe. Nothing too crazy. Like I said, he's been doing 3-on-3 for 2 weeks.
Right.
So instead of him doing 3-on-3 for such a prolonged period of time, I think they would have fast-tracked that process, got him a couple 3-on-3s in, which is we've seen in the past where they've done this. Couple 3-on-3s. All right, boom. Let's get him to 5-on-5 a couple days later. Get him a couple 5-on-5s in. He's ready to play. But with this long of an injury, grade 3 ankle sprain, took their time with it a little bit more. Kind of what they're doing with Brandon Clark. Brandon Clark has been doing 3-on-3 work as well, and he's just got to 5-on-5 just a couple days ago. And again, he's in 5-on-5, but he's probably not going to be back on this road trip. I don't think, probably a little bit after that. So it just goes to show they're taking their time with these guys. Whereas with Brandon Clark already going to 5-on-5, typically I would say, oh, well, he's going to be back mid next week or something like that. So I think it's also a case of the Grizzlies, operating out of, some extra caution because of the idea. I mean, they're already bringing these guys back and people are talking about the risk that's involved. Right. So just operate out of that extra caution. Why not?
Certainly no point in rushing them back. I agree with you on that. I'll get you out of here on this, Damichael. The idea of Bane's return, let's assume it does happen at home on Saturday night against the Thunder. Who are you most excited to watch Bane alongside if we're assuming that Jaren comes back, if we're assuming that Vince Williams Jr. is back on the floor, they all come back at the same time. What are you most excited about? Are you most excited about seeing Bane next to this version of G.G. Jackson, this version of Vince Williams Jr.? What, as you look at the changes that have happened to the roster over the last couple of months since Bane's been out, what stands out to you in terms of what you want to see from Bane going into this game and the rest of the season?
The easy answer is G.G. Jackson, right? I mean, I think we all want to see him alongside of G.G. Jackson because G.G.'s played beside Jaren and pretty much all the young guys. But I'm going to go a different route. I want to see him beside Scottie Pippen Jr.
Ooh.
He's on a 2-way deal, and he'll probably start next season on a 2-way deal and whatnot. But he's relevant. He's relevant to the Grizzlies guard conversation right now at this point. He's been productive, whether it's the scoring. I just mentioned the assist. He's been a productive player in Memphis, but he hasn't played, with a guard the caliber of Desmond Bane since he's been here. I want to see how does that affect his game, because now he's going to be off the ball a little bit more. He's going to be on the ball some as well. How is he going to, we see Desmond Bane on those off the ball pin downs and things like that, those curls. Is he going to look for Desmond Bane in those situations? How long is that adjustment going to take? Because you got a guy like that in the floor with you. You got to get him the ball. And, he's found Luke Kennard in similar situations, but it's a whole nother monster with Desmond Bane. That's the guy I want to see the most, because if I see him feeding Desmond Bane and playing well off of Desmond Bane, when Desmond Bane is more on the ball, I think that solidifies what I believe about him, which is that he can be a factor into the roster conversation going into next season as a two-way guy, most certainly, but possibly even more than that.
Scottie Pippen Jr. is a great answer to that question. I think that what he is able to do playing alongside everybody that isn't Ja Morant, because if Scottie Pippen Jr. is the guy, he probably can't play next to Ja, and you need to see him alongside literally everyone else that you can to confirm that there's fits and pieces within the roster itself. So I'm with you. I like the Scottie Pippen Jr. answer. Again, in the comments, let us know, who do you think should be the focus with Bane's return likely coming on Saturday against the Thunder? We'll talk about that game and so much more. The road trip that's ahead coming up on our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies on Monday. Got a 4-game roadie coming up for Memphis. We'll talk about that and what happened against the Thunder on Saturday night. That'll all be on our Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you so much to my co-host, Damichael Cole, for being back with me on this episode. It is much appreciated. Thank you, dear listener, dear viewer, for being with us wherever you are, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, and make us a part of your everyday NBA and Grizzlies content consumption, as we are proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Don't forget about Locked On Sports Today over on YouTube's 24/7 streaming channel. Make sure you're checking out Locked On NBA and all of the other great shows of the Locked On Podcast Network in the days ahead as we head into a nice weekend. For Damichael, I am Joe. Stay locked in, Grizzlies fans. Enjoy the return of Desmond Bane, hopefully on Saturday night. We will catch you back here on Monday on Locked On Grizzlies. Have a good one.